Stop everything, because this is the kind of legal move that makes the whole rap world freeze for a second and say, hold on. Did Durk just call in the one attorney everybody in hip-hop is scared of? Because the minute Brian Steele's name got attached to Lil Durk's defense, the conversation changed overnight. This was no longer just another celebrity case update. This became strategy talk, survival talk, legacy talk. The same lawyer fans watched go to war in one of the most chaotic, exhausting, headline-dominating rap trials in recent memory is now stepping into Durk's world, and people are already asking the biggest question possible. If Brian Steele helped Young Thug avoid the kind of sentence people feared could bury him forever, can he do something similar here? And that's where the drama really begins. Because this is not some simple fairy tale where a star lawyer walks in and magically makes the case disappear. No. This is federal pressure, public scrutiny, courtroom chess, and a culture already left divided over lyrics, image, and what happens when rap fame collides with real legal consequences. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and suddenly every move, every filing, every delay, and every courtroom decision feels like part of a much bigger plan. So tonight, we're breaking down why Brian Steele's arrival has everybody talking, what made him so feared in the first place, and the exact kind of defense playbook people believe he could use to try to save Durk from the fight of his life. Main body. The minute Brian Steele's name started circulating around Durk's case, the whole energy changed. Not a little. Completely. Because in rap, lawyers are usually talked about only when people are desperate, when the pressure is already unbearable, when the headlines are ugly, and when the stakes are so high that one bad move can permanently rewrite a career. But Brian Steele is not seen like an ordinary attorney in hip-hop spaces. He's seen like a courtroom gladiator, a pressure fighter, the kind of defense lawyer whose very presence makes fans sit up and start believing there may still be a path through the storm. That is why this moment hit so hard online. People were not reacting like, oh, Durk hired another lawyer. No, they reacted like, wait a minute, he brought in Brian Steele? Those are two very different reactions. One is ordinary. The other is cinematic. The other sounds like the final act of a legal thriller where the main character refuses to go down quietly. And in the world of YouTube rap news, that is the kind of twist that instantly becomes bigger than the filing itself. Now let's be clear from the start. Nobody outside that defense team knows some secret master plan being whispered behind closed doors. Anybody acting like they've seen the full blueprint is selling fantasy. But what people can do is look at Brian Steele's reputation, look at the way he handled another massive rap case under extreme pressure, look at what kinds of arguments have already been raised in Durk's matter, and start connecting dots. And once people started doing that, the speculation exploded. Because to understand why fans are reacting this way, you have to understand what Brian Steele represents. He represents resistance. He represents refusing to let the government's narrative go unchallenged. He represents the idea that even when prosecutors come in with a giant story, a giant case, giant accusations, and giant headlines, the defense can still break that story apart piece by piece, witness by witness, ruling by ruling. That reputation alone changes morale. It changes the mood around a case. One supporter online basically captured the vibe in a single sentence. This ain't just legal help. This is war prep. And that may sound dramatic, but honestly, that is exactly how people in hip-hop are reading this. Because when a case is already emotionally charged, politically charged, culturally charged, and the internet is treating every filing like breaking news, the person leading the courtroom fight becomes almost mythic. Especially if he has already been battle-tested in a case that felt impossible from the outside. That is where the Young Thug comparison comes in. For months and months, people watched that case like it was never going to end. It had chaos, tension, shocking moments, legal arguments that spilled into headlines, public confusion, and constant predictions of doom. A lot of people believed Young Thug was facing the kind of situation where, if everything went the wrong way, the consequences could be devastating beyond imagination. The public kept throwing around huge sentence numbers, terrifying worst-case scenarios, and that dark phrase everybody in rap hates hearing, he might never come home. And yet, in the middle of all that pressure, Brian Steele became one of the most talked-about defense lawyers in the country. Why? Because he didn't just play defense in the passive sense. He fought. He challenged. He objected. He pushed. He made himself impossible to ignore. And in the public imagination, that created a powerful image. This is the lawyer who does not fold under pressure. Now here is where the story gets complicated. Some fans hear Brian Steele got Young Thug out and turn that into a superhero headline, like one man waved a legal wand and pulled off a miracle. But real legal fights are never that simple. Cases turn on facts, charges, forum, rulings, leverage, timing, and negotiation. Still, public perception matters, and the public perception is this. Brian Steele knows how to fight massive, reputation-destroying rap prosecutions without letting the other side control the whole narrative. That is the aura he brings into Durk's case. And for Durk, aura matters right now almost as much as argument. Because let's be honest, this is not just a legal case. It is also an image war. It is a public belief war. It is a morale war. Once somebody becomes the subject of a major federal case, especially one tied to violence allegations, the public starts doing something dangerous. They stop distinguishing between accusation and certainty. They start hearing headlines as verdicts. They start replaying lyrics, interviews, old clips, photos, and affiliations in a brand new way. That is how careers start getting damaged long before a case is resolved. So when somebody like Brian Steele arrives, he is not only there to make arguments in court. He is there to disrupt inevitability. And that may be the single most important thing people believe he can do for Durk. Because one of the worst things that can happen to a defendant in a major public case is for the whole world to start acting like the ending has already been written. Once that happens, every motion feels weaker, every defense point gets mocked, every delay is framed as desperation, and every attempt to fight back is treated like denial instead of strategy. A lawyer with Steele's reputation can interrupt that emotional momentum. He can make people believe the story is not over. You could almost imagine the conversation in a room full of supporters going like this. One person says, "The pressure is too heavy. This looks bad." Another says, "Maybe. But now Brian Steele is in it." And just like that, the room changes. Not because the facts disappear. Not because the risk disappears. But because hope comes back into the room. That is a big deal. Now let's talk about the exact kind of playbook people think he could use, because this is where the title really comes to life. Not in the sense of claiming to know his secret plan, but in the sense of understanding the lanes a lawyer like him is most likely to attack. The first lane is narrative control. In cases like this, prosecutors do not merely present isolated facts. They present a story. A story with motive, alliances, emotion, structure, retaliation, influence, and meaning. If they are allowed to tell that story cleanly and dramatically, the defense is already in trouble. So one of the smartest things a high-level defense lawyer tries to do is fracture the story. Break it into pieces. Force the government to prove each link separately. Turn one big scary theory into many smaller arguments that do not automatically connect. That sounds technical, but emotionally it is everything. Because a big sweeping government story can feel overwhelming to jurors and to the public. It feels complete. It feels cinematic. It feels persuasive even before every detail has been tested. But once a defense lawyer starts pulling at the threads, the magic can weaken. What looked like a complete picture starts looking like a pile of assumptions. What sounded inevitable starts sounding debatable. What looked like one clean theory starts looking like 10 fragile inferences stacked on top of each other. That is the kind of shift people think Brian Steele can create for Durk. The second lane is attacking prejudice. And this matters so much because Durk's case already sits inside a larger cultural war over rap, lyrics, image, and the way artists are portrayed in court. A lawyer like Steele can be expected to focus heavily on the difference between what is dramatic and what is actually probative. In plain language, just because something sounds bad does not mean it proves the thing prosecutors want it to prove. Just because a lyric is aggressive does not mean it is autobiography. Just because an artist has a certain image does not mean the government gets to use every piece of that image as a shortcut to guilt. That is a dangerous area for the prosecution, because the more they rely on things that feel inflammatory, the more the defense can argue they are trying to win with vibe instead of proof. And once that argument lands, the moral energy of the case can shift. Picture Brian Steele leaning into that theme with laser focus. The message would be simple but powerful. You are not trying my client for headlines, aesthetics, persona, or performance. You are trying him for specific charges, And if you cannot prove those charges cleanly, you do not get to fill the gaps with art and atmosphere. That kind of argument does not just challenge evidence. It challenges the emotional frame of the whole case. The third lane people think he could use is timing. Timing is everything in a criminal case. When was something written? When was it recorded? When was it said? When was it known? When did one event actually happen relative to another? These details may sound boring to the internet, but in court they can become dynamite. Because once the defense proves that a dramatic interpretation of evidence depends on fuzzy or incorrect timing, the government can lose credibility fast. And that matters hugely in a public case. Why? Because public trust is fragile. If the defense can show that a key piece of the prosecution's theory exaggerates, misreads, or overstates chronology, supporters immediately start asking, if they stretched that part, what else did they stretch? That question alone can rattle the whole narrative. The fourth lane is witness pressure. High-profile conspiracy-style prosecutions often depend not just on physical evidence or digital evidence, but on interpretation, cooperation, credibility, context, and how witnesses describe events and relationships. A seasoned defense lawyer knows that a witness does not have to be caught in one giant lie to lose impact. Sometimes all it takes is hesitation, inconsistency, self-interest, selective memory, or a motive to shift blame. Brian Steele built his public reputation on being relentless in those moments. Calm when necessary. Aggressive when necessary. Patient when necessary. But always hunting for weakness. That is why people think his presence could matter so much in Durk's case. Because if the government story depends on witnesses helping connect dots, then the defense does not always have to destroy the entire picture at once. Sometimes it only has to make the dots feel less trustworthy, less clean, less certain, less safe to rely on. And once reasonable doubt starts breathing, everything changes. The fifth lane is humanization. Do not underestimate how important this is. In massive public cases, defendants can become symbols. Villains in the media, emblems of a genre, avatars of a lifestyle, stand-ins for bigger social anxieties. The danger there is obvious. Once a defendant becomes a symbol, people stop seeing a person. A good defense lawyer works to reverse that, to restore scale, to put a human being back at the center of the courtroom. This does not mean putting on a show. It means making sure the court sees the defendant as more than a headline and more than a persona. Father, husband, son, artist, employer, community figure. A person whose entire life cannot be reduced to the worst interpretation of selected material. And in a case as publicly charged as Durk's, that kind of humanization is not a side issue. It is survival strategy. Because jurors do not only evaluate facts in a vacuum. They also evaluate the person in front of them. They observe. They absorb tone. They notice dignity, discipline, calm, arrogance, chaos, humility, and control. A lawyer who understands that can reshape the emotional weather of a courtroom. The sixth lane is leverage. This is the part fans sometimes ignore because it is less exciting than dramatic objections and viral courtroom moments. But high-level defense work is not only about trial combat. It is also about position, about increasing pressure on the government, about creating enough uncertainty, enough risk, enough vulnerability in the prosecution's path that the whole strategic landscape changes. Sometimes the most important legal work is invisible to the public because it happens through motions, hearings, evidentiary fights, negotiations, and the quiet creation of options. That is why people who know how legal strategy works are not just asking whether Brian Steele can win some flashy moment. They are asking whether he can improve Durk's overall position. Can he narrow the case? Can he suppress the most damaging emotional material? Can he expose weak links? Can he complicate the government's cleanest storyline? Can he make the road to conviction harder, slower, riskier, and less certain? If the answer to enough of those questions becomes yes, then suddenly the case feels very different than it did before he arrived. Now let's talk about the emotional side, because you cannot understand this story without it. Durk is not just fighting charges. He is fighting the weight of public reaction, the internet's appetite for downfall, the tendency to treat every accusation like a trailer for a conviction, and the impossible burden of being a rap star whose lyrics and image already live inside public memory. That is a brutal combination. Fans are shocked because they know how quickly the culture turns. Today, people are shouting your innocence. Tomorrow, the same people are reposting every old clip with ominous music under it. So when Brian Steele enters that environment, supporters do not just see legal help. They see somebody who may be able to restore discipline to the chaos. Somebody who can force the conversation back toward proof, standards, fairness, and burden instead of speculation and panic. And make no mistake, panic is exactly what this moment had become for a lot of people. You could feel it in the online reaction. Some were acting like the case was already over. Some were saying nobody beats federal pressure. Some were saying bringing in a top lawyer this late means the team knows just how serious things are. Others saw it differently. They saw it as a power move. A signal that the defense is not rolling over. A signal that the team is preparing for a much more aggressive and sophisticated fight. That split reaction is what makes the story so compelling. Because both readings are dramatic. If you are pessimistic, you say, this is a last stand move. They know how bad it is. If you are optimistic, you say, this is the smartest move they could have made. Now the fight really starts. Either way, the stakes feel enormous. Then there is the young thug shadow hanging over all of this. Fans do not just remember that case as a legal process. They remember it as an emotional roller coaster. They remember the exhaustion, the spectacle, the constant twists, the sense that it could swallow years of a man's life and identity. And in the middle of that, Brian Steele became a kind of folk hero to a lot of supporters. Tough, sharp, defiant, willing to challenge the machinery around him. So now that same energy is being projected onto Durk's situation. The logic in the comments basically goes like this: if he fought that hard there, imagine what he is about to do here. But there is another layer people cannot ignore. These are not identical cases. Different charges, different jurisdiction, different facts, different evidence, different risks, different procedural posture. That matters, and a serious analysis has to say so. The danger of celebrity legal coverage is that people start talking like lawyers are magicians and all cases are remixes of the same story. They are not. One attorney's reputation cannot erase the unique seriousness of a separate case. So anybody being honest has to admit this. Brian Steele's arrival raises hope, but it does not guarantee anything. And that truth actually makes the drama more intense, not less. Because now the whole story becomes about whether elite defense lawyering can shift a case that already feels emotionally loaded and publicly polluted. Can skill overcome narrative? Can discipline overcome fear? Can strategy overcome the momentum of a huge prosecution? That is the kind of question that keeps people glued to updates. Now imagine the internal mood around Durk's camp. Publicly, everybody tries to stay composed. But privately, you know the stress has to be unbelievable. Family watching, friends reacting, fans posting, "Free him," 1 minute and fear posting the next. Every delay interpreted as either a blessing or a warning. Every ruling broken down by strangers online like they are sitting at council table. The family was left divided in the broader sense of the word, too, because the entire rap community is split between hope and dread. One side says, Brian Steele means he still has a real shot. The other side says, a star lawyer can only do so much if the government's case is strong. And in between those two poles sits the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes even the best defense strategy is less about miracles and more about damage control, narrowing risk, preserving rights, exposing overreach, and making sure the case is decided by law instead of hype. But even that can be enormous. Because in a case where public perception has already turned into a circus, restoring legal seriousness is itself a form of rescue. There is also something symbolic about this move that should not be underestimated. Hip-hop has long felt that the system is more comfortable criminalizing rap imagery than understanding rap context. That frustration runs deep. So when a defense lawyer with a hard-fighting reputation steps into another major rap case, some fans are not just thinking about Durk. They are thinking about the genre, about the repeated collision between prosecutors and performers, about the ongoing battle over whether artists are being judged differently from other entertainers. In that sense, Brian Steele's arrival feels larger than one defendant. It feels like another chapter in the legal war around modern rap itself. And that is why the content around this story is so explosive. It has everything: fame, fear, strategy, survival, memory of another massive case, public mythology around a defense lawyer, unresolved questions, conflicting predictions, a superstar defendant, a fanbase desperate for hope. This is not just legal news anymore. This is reality TV level tension inside a federal courtroom frame. So what exactly is the plan to save Durk? If you strip away the clickbait and the fantasy, it likely looks something like this: challenge the broadest and most prejudicial narrative, force the government to prove every connection with precision, fight hard over what the jury gets to hear, narrow the emotional contamination of lyrics, image, and aura, test the reliability and motive of any witness who helps connect the story, expose weaknesses in chronology or interpretation, humanize the defendant relentlessly, and create as much strategic leverage as possible at every stage. That may not sound flashy enough for a thumbnail, but in real life, that is how serious defense work changes cases. Not with one magical speech, not with one viral moment, but with pressure, detail, discipline, stamina, and an unwillingness to concede the government's version of reality. And if Brian Steele really brings all of that energy into Durk's fight, then yes, the entire case could start looking very different than it did before his name appeared on the team. Will that be enough? That is the million-dollar question, because hope and certainty are not the same thing. Fans are shocked because they want to believe this move changes everything. Critics are skeptical because they know a famous lawyer does not erase serious allegations. Supporters are energized because they have seen what relentless defense work can do to public momentum. And the broader culture is watching because this case now feels like a referendum on far more than one man's future. Maybe Brian Steele cannot save Durk in the simplistic movie script way the internet wants to believe. But maybe saving a client in a case like this is not about one dramatic miracle at all. Maybe it is about preventing the government from telling an unchecked story. Maybe it is about protecting the line between art and assumption. Maybe it is about making sure fear does not become evidence. Maybe it is about reminding everybody in that courtroom that fame is not guilt, persona is not proof, and headlines are not verdicts. And if that is the mission, then you can see exactly why his arrival matters so much. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing for any defendant is not only the evidence against them. It is the moment people start believing the ending is already written. Brian Steele's real power, if he has one, is that he makes people question whether that ending is as inevitable as they thought. Conclusion and call to action. So that is why this move has the whole rap world locked in right now. Brian Steele is not just another name added to a legal document. To a lot of fans, he represents resistance, disruption, and the possibility that a case everyone is treating like a collapse could still become a real fight. His reputation from another massive hip-hop prosecution has people wondering whether he can do it again, whether he can break apart the government story, challenge the most damaging interpretations, and give Durk the kind of defense energy that changes everything. But the biggest unanswered question is still hanging in the air. Is this the beginning of a comeback narrative, or the clearest sign yet of just how serious the danger really is? That is why people cannot look away. The stakes are too high, the pressure is too intense, and every courtroom move now feels loaded with meaning. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think bringing Brian Steele onto the team was the smartest move Durk could make? Do you think a lawyer's strategy can really shift a case this heavy, or do you think people online are putting way too much faith in one name? And be honest, when you heard Brian Steele was stepping in, did your whole view of the case change instantly or not? Drop your opinion in the comments right now. If you want more breakdowns with this same energy, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update. Because this story is far from over, emotions are still running high, and one courtroom decision could flip the whole conversation overnight. If you want, I can also write the next one in the exact same style on any Durk, Thug, YSL, or rap trial topic you have.